Hi, everyone. Welcome to Life Skills with Louie. If you're new, welcome back. If you've been listening to these, thank you for listening. Today, we're talking about assertiveness, and the skill comes directly from DBT. That's where I learned it, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. There's a lot of materials online about this, which I'll mention multiple times. The way DBT describes this skill is they use the acronym Dear Man. I added a couple letters to that, making it Dear Human. And I think this hits some key points that weren't explicitly mentioned and also is a nod to the whole species. So, to dive right in, the acronym for assertiveness is Dear Human. Describe, express, assert, ask, reinforce, how strong to assert, upwards assertiveness, mindfully, appearing confident, and negotiate. I'm going to go through all of those. There are extra videos on the H and the U in this video series. There's tons of information about the DEARMAN in online through DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and I encourage you to search that. And I encourage you to practice this in therapy. Before I go into each of these letters, I do want to say this is one of 3 large sections in interpersonal skills in this video series. If you haven't watched the introduction to the interpersonal skills, I encourage you to watch it. And if you haven't watched the introduction to this whole section called Learning to Love, I encourage you to watch that too. And if you haven't watched the introduction to the entire video series, I encourage you to watch that because that will help you understand how all the sections fit together. We've talked about self-respect effectiveness from DBT, feeling a sense of self-respect and how important that is. We've talked about relationship effectiveness, building a bond, and that's the giver skills. The self-respect is fast and the relationship is the giver skills. And now we're talking about assertiveness, which is the Dear Human skills. And why is assertiveness really important? Because if you don't assert yourself, you don't exist. So some people have a negative connotation with assertiveness, and I would encourage you to examine that because actually to have a real relationship, you must assert yourself. You must be you. That's that. So let's dive right in about what this means. First, you don't have to practice these in order when you're practicing with people. Some may be more important than others, but they all are important, and I tend to use all of them. And I teach all of them. The first is to describe when you're starting a moment of assertiveness with someone, to describe a little about the situation that you're in or you were in. Hey, when we were talking the other day, you were a little rushed, it seemed, and I was talking, but you interrupted a few times, and then I wasn't able to finish my point. I'm trying to be very specific here. This is not the place that I'm giving opinions or I'm judging someone. I'm telling them just the facts. Just the facts. That's described. There's a video on describe in the Being Beyond if you want to learn more about that. This sets the foundation. Next is express. Sometimes this is more important. Sometimes asserting and asking is more important. And you can think about which. So if you are mostly focused on just expressing yourself, you don't need something specific other than to express yourself. This might be the key section. I think this, I feel this. Feelings are generally less threatening than thoughts because thoughts can have judgments in them. But expressing yourself in whatever way you need is very important. Next comes assert, ask. So this is where we assert what we need, we ask for what we need, or we assert no. The key here is to keep it simple, short, concrete, specific, not abstract, not, I need you to be a better person. What does that mean? Person is going to have no idea. When I come home, I would really like a hug every day when I come home. That's very clear. They can either give it to you or not give it to you. They know what's being asked for. So be very clear with assertiveness. and what you're asking for. The R stands for reinforce. So when we can, we always want a win-win situation. If you're asking for something and it could benefit the other person, let them know the way it could benefit them. So if you give me a hug when I get home, I'm going to be more relaxed, more connected. I'm going to have an easier time listening to you because that's what you love and that's what you like. So tell them that if that's the case. If there's nothing reinforcing about what you're asking for, be aware. That means this is a little lopsided and you're going to need to do more work to grease the wheels. Speaking of grease the wheels, related to reinforcing, when I'm practicing these skills, I'm always practicing the giver skills too. I'm interested, I'm gentle, I'm validating, I'm easy-mannered, I'm respectful. This builds the bond because asserting tends to strain the bond, especially with people who are more anxious, people who are good at assertiveness, love assertiveness. H stands for how strong to assert. So this skill is about moving away from 0 or 100, black or white, all or nothing. When you ask for something, very rarely is it 100% don't take no for an answer or 100% no. Many times there's a gradation, and I have a whole video to talk more about this. EBT does such a good job describing this, and it's really helped me to understand so much about the variation and how strong you can go into something. I always prepare myself beforehand for how strong I'm going to assert myself. The U stands for upwards assertiveness. There's a video on this because it's something new that I'm bringing in. And the saying that goes with this one is speak for, not from, not against. Speak for your feelings, speak for your needs, advocate for them, but don't speak from them. Don't be in a place where you're lost in emotion or lost in need. This can bring you to feel more dysregulated, more highly emotional, which makes you less effective. And also, there can be a desperation or an intensity that brings up reactivity. So, come from a confident place where I'm speaking for my values and my needs. I know they're important. I'm not asking for someone to tell me they're important. I know they're important and I'm just speaking for them. And as far as against, if you're speaking against someone, you're kind of in direct reaction to them. The most inspiring people, of our species are always speaking for higher values. It is a more powerful position. Mindfully has to do with setting your mind when you start to talk about what you need. Some people will have a derailing quality where they start to talk about something totally different, or they shift the focus to, yeah, but what about over there at that time? EBT coaches to be a broken record, laser focus on what you care about. So you say, hey, I'd really like a hug every day when I get home. And the person says, what about that thing you said to me 3 weeks ago? I appreciate you bringing that up. I'd love to talk about that. At this moment, though, I'd like to stick with the hug and then we'll get to that later. So broken record, coming back to your focus, not letting people derail you. Appearing confident, even if there's emotions going on inside that are intense, that are leading you to want to move away, like fear, or sink like sadness or hopelessness, or come in strong like anger. Appear confident, centered, settled, and attempt to stay there as much as possible. When you're doing the assertiveness, it's more effective. Finally, negotiate. People forget about this, just like they forget about how strong. If someone says no, you can back off a little. All right, asking for a hug every day, that's a little rigid. That's a little too much. How about a couple times a week? Would that work for you? When I get home, a hug a couple times a week? Be willing to be flexible, negotiate. It's can be a joy when you get good at this skill of negotiate. So To recap, describe, express, assert, ask, reinforce, how strong to assert, upwards assertiveness, mindfully, appear confident, negotiate. You can practice this beforehand. You can write it out. You can work with your therapist or a friend or a mentor, especially if it's a big, important assertiveness. The last key thing I'll say is that you want to try to the best of your ability, take care of your emotions before you go into important session of assertiveness. This will bring you into a more confident place. The getting to great skills are very helpful for taking care of yourself. So feel free to look at those if needed. And thank you for watching, and I hope this is helpful.